All right, welcome back to Mudwalkers. My name is Chris. You'll notice that today's video shares some content with last week's video. That's because I had so much to say about 1 Timothy chapter 2 that I realized it was going to become a very, very long video. So instead of doing that to you, I decided to cut it up into two parts and take one of the largest topics I wanted to cover in that video and make it its own video, which we'll look at right now. We're already pretty much agreed across the board, I think, that Paul is talking about women here, and it doesn't even mention men's attire at all. So we're going to be talking mainly about women's attire in this video. I want to challenge you, dear viewer, a little bit. I'm going to show you a few drawings here. Now don't worry, these drawings don't feature the things that we usually refer to as nudity. There are no nipples, there are no genitals, etc., etc. Now you will see the general shape of a human being here and there, but those anatomical details have been left blank for the sake of my textile viewers. I wanted to make this as comfortable for you as I can so that you'll hear me out and watch the video and engage with the content. Because it's not like I've brought you here to gross you out or to shock you. As a naturist, I realize that sometimes I'm going to say and do and show insensitive things. I'm gonna make mistakes, but I'm trying to be as gentle as I can with textiles. So here are some drawings that I made showing the contrast that Paul has in mind here. But bear in mind, every single one of these contrasts fits into Paul's paradigm in 1 Timothy 2, 9, and 10. Let's take a look. Something that stands out when you look for it in 1 Timothy 2:9 is that Paul nowhere actually mandates the concealment of any body part at all, or any group of body parts. He doesn't order concealment at all. He just orders women to wear humble clothing instead of ostentatious clothing, and he says women should be adorned in good works. So even if we grant the textile interpretation for women's clothing as far as it goes, it simply can't lead to the kind of concealment mandate that textiles want it to.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
For example, Paul does mention the Greek katastole, which, as we saw in last week's video, doesn't actually lead us to the conclusion that Paul's mandating that specific style of garment for modern American women. It just doesn't work that way. However, even if Paul did mandate that kind of long skirt, there's nothing in the passage mandating any certain posture or positioning of that skirt. For example, let's say a woman wanted to go sit on the front pew of the church during the sermon, and she decided to get more comfortable. Now, understand, in this scenario, the woman is not trying to get the pastor's attention, she's just being comfortable. But as she raises her knee, her skirt falls down into her lap and reveals her legs and stuff. So she's still wearing it, but it's not positioned the way that textiles want it to. Do you see the problem here? Even if a woman is wearing a modest sort of shirt or dress, and she raises her arm in a certain way, and you can see inside, or she leans down and you can see inside, etc., etc., or she's helping out with some kind of construction project, and she stands up on a ladder or a scaffolding, and she's moving her legs around, she's trying to work, and the men underneath her can just look up and they can see into her skirt. None of that is in the passage. It just says she has to wear the thing, not that it has to be any maximally concealing posture or position. Again, it's just not present in the text. You can't get from 1 Timothy 2, 9, and 10 to some kind of concealment mandate. The passage just doesn't say the kinds of things it needs to get there.
Pepe Sylvia. This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail, well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia. So I say to myself, I gotta find this guy. I gotta go up to his office. I gotta put his mail in the guy's hands, otherwise he's never gonna get it. It's gonna keep coming back down here. So I go up to Pepe's office, and what do I find out, man? What do I find out? There is no Pepe Sylvia. The man does not exist, okay? So I decided, oh, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper. There's no Pepe Sylvia. You gotta be kidding me. I got boxes full of Pepe.
And like I said, it's already pretty broadly agreed. The catastole itself isn't at issue here. It's the general concept. But what is that general concept? Is that general concept a sort of concealment? I would say no. Concealment doesn't even show up anywhere in the passage. What does show up is avoiding gaudy, ostentatious, prideful displays of wealth and prioritizing righteousness and humility instead. That's what's in view in the passage. That's the broader concept. So since we agree that there's a broad concept at work here and not the specific catastole, that justifies my examples with all these various forms of clothing. Because it's still women wearing modest versus immodest clothing in the sense that Paul's talking about. Humble versus ostentatious clothing is what is in view here. So if a woman is wearing something that reveals or fails to conceal, rather, the kinds of things that modern Americans want to conceal, it's not at issue at all in Paul's epistle. These are all completely valid. Now, before anyone goes too crazy, I want to say that clothing, or at least the culturally mandatory things that people wear on their bodies, are not always there to conceal the parts of the body that that modern American evangelicals want to cover. That's very often not the point of ancient garments. I could give examples from every habitable continent on the planet throughout human history. Okay, all I have to do is say Amazonian tribes, right? Look up the Timucua peoples from ancient Florida. You've got the Aztecs and things all over South America, not just the Amazon. Then you have lots of nudity in Asia, including feudal Japan. You've got, obviously in the Philippines, you've got nude natives over there. You've got people in Hawaii wearing basically nothing when Captain Cook arrived there. You've got the natives in Australia, need I say more, who were very often out in the Australian wilderness wearing basically nothing. And then I already mentioned Africa. You have similarly depicted natives in Europe. Yes, there were natives in Europe before civilization arrived there. And on and on and on and on it goes. There's people showing up all over the world with no clothes on, okay? But let's zero in on one specific example that I think really drives this home. Prior to European contact, the Waorani people in the Amazon wore basically only strings. It was a shoestring, more or less, that ran around the waist about the level of where we would put a belt or other waistline here in waistband here in America. So this shoestring would be run across the waist. And for a man, the penis would be drawn upward and stretched into position, held erect, and then they would pierce the foreskin and run that string through the foreskin and tie it. And of course, in that position, you're literally tying the penis erect. It's standing straight up along the body, right here where the zipper is, all the way up. So it makes this nice little T shape with a penis. I'm not going to depict that in a photograph, obviously, although there are lots of photos of that if you just Google it. I recommend or don't recommend that depending on your outlook on life. But for the women, they also wore the string, but obviously there's no penis to tie erect. It was just string. Now, how and why the string was originally made mandatory in Waorani antiquity, I think is a mystery. Personally, I think it's the remnants of a loincloth they used to wear and then eventually gave up on because of resource scarcity, etc., etc. But I'm not sure we can really know at this point. It was so far back in their history that, at least as far as I recall from what I've read about it, they seem not to remember culturally how it started. Now, it's interesting. A man has this string tied and it holds his penis in the upright and locked position. But if he unties his string and just goes walking through the village with his penis pointed toward the ground, it's considered obscene and sexual. Dude, there's kids here. Put that thing back up. There's a child here. Make sure your penis is pointing upward when there's children present, sir. It sounds backwards to us. But that's how Waorani culture was. Interestingly, the women didn't really have a practical function for the string because they don't have penises. But if a woman forgot her string and she stepped outside of her hut and realized she didn't have her string on, she would run back inside. It was considered embarrassing to be seen in public without her string. It's almost like an American woman with no shirt on, no bra, no nothing up top, just accidentally opens her front door and walks out into the neighborhood and then immediately goes, "Oh no, I forgot my shirt," and then goes back inside. It's the same sort of reaction, but these women were reacting to not wearing a shoestring around the waist. So this string is the only clothing these people had. So let's say Paul writes this same verse to a group of Waorani women. Let's say that Waorani women were gathering together in worship, and some of them were wearing gold and pearl beads with lots of like strings of jewels hanging down off of their strings, and they were wearing their hair all up and everything, and their little gold bracelets, and they were lording themselves over the other women of the village. The rule would still apply. Ladies, instead of wearing gold and pearls and expensive clothing, you should wear simpler, humbler clothing instead and adorn yourselves in good works. It still works. This episode of Mudwalkers is brought to you by Patreon. These guys are my patrons. They're making the channel happen. They're keeping my work sustainable. So everybody on Patreon, thank you for what you do. Every little bit counts. So, over on Patreon, you get early access to all my mainline content videos like this one at every level of support. However, depending on your level of support over on Patreon, you also get access to my Patreon exclusive content, things like travel vlogs, cooking videos, behind the scenes movie content, because I'm going to be in several naturist movies this year. But also just in general, you'll get Patreon exclusive content that just doesn't appear here on Mudwalkers on YouTube. Now, it's my educational, informative content tends to go up here on YouTube, all of that. But the naturist content, like World Naked Bike Ride videos and naturist resort tours, things like that, that stuff goes over on Patreon. The Patreon people also get access at certain levels of support to our monthly Zoom call, where they get to hang out with me and each other and have great conversations, hang out and share stories, swap ideas. It's a great time. I also have a website now, nakedmeanshuman.com. Sign up for my newsletter over there. It's free. Over there you can also find more and more content as we put more up on the website. I'm new to websites. I'm trying to get there. We're growing. We're getting more and more up all the time. That's it for the commercial, the little commercial break here. So let's get back into the video. The nail in the coffin here, though, is that Paul really does get rather specific about what he means by modest clothing in verse 10. Paul's contrast is not ladies cover up instead of uncovering. His contrast is quit it with all the rich stuff and wear good works instead. Like I said last week, Paul is only regulating clothing in this passage, not mandating it. We saw that in last week's video, which I think I already linked above at some point. There are lots of factors that go into why I view the passage this way. First of all, Paul says absolutely nothing in this passage about what men are or aren't supposed to wear. So if you want to mandate that men have to wear pants, you're going to have to find that some other place. You won't, because the verse doesn't exist, but you would have to find it somewhere else if you were going to find it, because men's clothing is not regulated in this passage at all.
There is no Pepe Sylvia.
Second, Paul's contrast is not exposure versus concealment, it's ostentation versus humility. That's the contrast. Third, the immediate context tells us that Paul is talking about conflict. And the culture tells us why women were dressing up this way to social functions. It wasn't just for funsies. It had a cultural meaning, it had a purpose behind it. It was a way for women to accrue otherwise unavailable and quite inappropriate social power over other women. You can see why Paul, the guy who wrote Galatians, would have been especially peeved about hearing that women were doing this in church. It makes perfect sense to be very against that and urge women to dress with humility instead of ostentation. Fourth, Paul gets really specific about what he means by modest clothing in verse 10. Let's take a look at this. All right. I desire then also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. Notice that Paul has the ideal at the beginning and the end, and he has the bad stuff sandwiched in the middle. What happens if we take all the good stuff and put it together and put the bad stuff over to one side? What kind of picture does that give us of what Paul's getting at with modesty? Here's what it basically says. Ladies, instead of showy displays of wealth, dress yourselves in modest clothes, by which I mean good works, as is only befitting of Christian women. So when we really dig into Paul's words here and read them carefully according to the original culture, we can see that what he's talking about has nothing to do with concealment at all. Indeed, if a Christian woman, has no clothing on, nothing on at all, just her own human body with nothing on it, and she goes to a worship service, and she praises the Lord and fellowships with her brothers and sisters in Christ, and she's comporting herself with humility and grace and kindness and consideration. Now, this would basically only happen in a naturist setting. So that's kind of a scenario we're looking at here, I suppose, is a naturist Christian woman going to a Christian naturist worship service. I've been to about 15 of those over the last couple of years. So I've seen this myself. That would fit into what Paul's talking about here, because he doesn't even mention concealment. It's not anywhere in what he's talking about. It's not relevant to his subject whatsoever. She is not dressing herself in gold and pearls and ostentatious clothing. She is dressing herself in good works. A Christian naturist woman who is comporting herself with decency is clothed in good works, according to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. Interestingly, this also harmonizes beautifully with what the Rock says in his epistle. Do not let your adorning be external, braided hair and gold jewelry, but let your adorning be the inner person of the heart. The Rock doesn't mention literal clothing at all here. If we understand the Rock, the Rock doesn't mention literal clothing at all here. If we understand Paul's words in their own context and culture, it looks like Paulos and the Rock were making exactly the same point. Food for thought. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.